Hello, everyone. So, welcome and thank you for joining us for the continuation of our lesson. So, we are now on video number 2 on our topic on proofs. Okay, so we will continue on our objectives, but this time we will focus on number 2, which is to write a proof, direct and indirect. Okay, so let us first focus on direct proof. By definition, direct proof is a sequence of statements, either givens or deductions from previous statements, and whose last statement is the conclusion to be proved. So, ganito lamang yan, no? So, for example, we are inside a court and we're trying to prove our innocence. Okay? So, we're trying to prove that we are not guilty. So, anong ginagawa natin, di ba? Nagsasabi tayo ng statements. It should be in sequence. Dapat siya ay sunod-sunod para hindi malilito yung judge o yung mga taong nag-o-observe sa atin. So, we are going to try our best to convince, okay, to convince the people that we are innocent. Okay? So, kailangan magbigay tayo ng statements with references. Okay? Dapat based on facts siya. At dapat meron tayong evidence na totoo ang mga iyon. Okay? At magtatapos yung ating speech by stating or by proving our conclusion. Which is, of course, our conclusion is that we are not guilty or we are innocent. So, ganun din ang gagawin natin. In mathematics, ang bibigyan natin ng direct proof ay yung conditional statements na ating pinag-aaralan. Remember, again, we are going back to our conditional statements. So, ito yung mga statements na if P then Q or asaka P implies Q. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to assume that P is true. Kasi 'di ba dati we are determining the truth value ng ating statements. So, when giving direct proof, we should assume that our P or our hypothesis is true. And from P, yung P na tumatayong ating given, yung mga facts na alam natin about P, as well as other information, yung mga concepts na alam natin, lahat yun pwede natin gamitin in order to deduce that Q, o yung ating conclusion, ay also true. Okay? Kasi ang end point natin or our goal is to show that P implies Q is true. Okay? So, para lalo nyong maintindihan, we need to provide an example. So, ito po. Okay. So, this particular example is exactly the same as the one in your module. Okay? So, if n is an odd integer, then n squared is odd. Okay, 'di ba? It will really help us if we could identify the parts first. And, of course, yung first part natin, that will be our hypothesis. That is our P. And the phrase after then will be our conclusion or our Q. Okay? So, our given is n is an odd integer. Okay? Now, we need to prove yung conclusion. So, what is our conclusion? We need to prove that n squared is an odd number. Okay, sabi natin, kailangan natin i-apply lahat ng mga previous knowledge natin. Okay? So, ano ba muna yung odd integer saka yung even integer? So, we know that odd integers are 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. We know that even integers are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. But, we should also be reminded that we could represent an even number by 2k. Okay? So, this k, this variable, could be any number or set of numbers. As long as we could factor out 2, it could be multiplied by 2, even number siya. Kasi let's check. 'Di ba? For example, k is an odd integer, about 3. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. 6 is an even number. 'Di ba po? What if k is an even number? For example, 4. 2 times 4 is 8. And 8 is also an even number. So, 'di ba? As you could see, as long as we could factor out 2, kahit ano pa tong k, kahit na nasa loob ng parenthesis yan at napakadaming values sa loob, as long as we have at factor 2, this is an even number. Okay? Eh, di ba, after ng even number, after ng 2, 4, after ng 2 is 3, okay? That is an odd number. So, technically, ang ginagawa lang natin is 2k plus 1. So, yung even number, when we add 1, it will give us an odd number. Okay? Keep this in mind, ha? Lagi nyo nang ma-encounter ito. Okay, so, we always start with the given. Okay, we have n is equal to 2k plus 1. O, diba? Saan nanggaling to? Given kasi na n is an odd integer. So, we simply represent n to be equal to 2k plus 1. Kasi sabi nga natin, 2k plus 1 is the representation of an odd number. Okay. And then, ayun, in-square natin si n at in-square din natin yung quantity 2k plus 1. Okay, bakit natin ginawa yan? N squared kasi we are trying to prove that n squared is odd. Okay? At hindi lamang yung n squared ang kailangan nating i-square, kailangan i-square din natin yung right side ng ating equation. Okay, di ba? Kung anong ginawa natin sa left side, we also have to do it dun sa ating right side in order to maintain the equality. Okay? So, ang reason na ilalagay natin, this is the square of an odd integer. Kasi ito nga po, n squared. We're trying to prove kung ano ba talaga ang n squared. Is it odd or is it even? Okay. Ang next step is let us perform the operation. So here we have quantity 2k plus 1 squared. So we could apply the square of a binomial. O yan. I-apply na naman natin yung ating previous knowledge. How do we square a binomial? So, we square a binomial by first squaring the first term. Our first term is 2k. So, 2k squared, so that's 4k squared. And then, plus twice the product of the two terms. So, times muna natin tong two terms. 2k plus 1 is 2k times 1 is 2k. Twice, so times 2, we will have 4k. Again, twice the product, 2k times 1 times 2 will give us 4k. And the last part is the square of the last term. Our last term is 1, so 1 squared, that is 1. Okay? So, again, ang reason natin dito is square of a binomial. Kasi in-square natin tong quantity 2k plus 1. Okay, so, kailangan nating, in order to prove that this is odd, kailangan natin siya mailagay sa gantong form. Yung 2k plus 1. Kasi nga, ito nga yung representation ng odd number. In order to do that, let us try if we could factor out 2. Yes, pwede po. Pwede nating i-factor out yung 2, may iwan sa loob ng parenthesis is 2k squared. Okay, bakit 2k squared? Diba yan, dilabas lang natin yung 2. Kita nyo, pag binalik ko yan, 2 times 2k squared, it will give us 4k squared. Diba? Baliktaran lang po. Nilabas ko si 2, ang may iwan sa loob, 2k. Ayan. Kasi 2 times 2k is 4k. Ayan. Tingnan nyo po to. Tingnan nyo itong form na to. We have 2 quantity 2k squared plus 2k plus 1. Halos kamukha na siya nito, di ba? Itong 2k plus 1. So, what we could do, yung loob ng parenthesis, we could assign a single, ang reason natin doon, finactor out natin yung 2, no? So, we could assign a single variable to represent 2k squared plus 2k. So, ito, no, yung loob ng parenthesis, palitan lamang natin siya ng variable na m. This could be any variable, if you like, s, Wag na P kasi nagamit na natin. R, pwedeng Z. Yan. Any variable will do. Basta wag lang po magdoble. So, let's try M. Okay, so papalitan lamang natin yung loob ng parenthesis ng variable na M. Okay? And, base dito sa nakikita natin, di ba, na n squared is equals to 2m plus 1, we've proven that n squared is odd. Di ba, itong form na to is the same as ito, yung definition natin ng odd number. So, n squared is odd by definition of an odd number. Okay, so nakita nyo yung flow. We started off with the given and we ended up with the statement that we are trying to prove, which is n squared is an odd number. Yan. So, ganun po. Ganun po ang steps in proving a statement, a given statement, using direct proof. So, ano naman po yung sinasabing indirect proof? Diba? So, pag in, diba, not. So, hindi siya direct. So, this is proof by assuming the opposite. Okay, paano yun? Exactly the same nung kaninang given. Pero kung gagamitin naman natin ay indirect proof. Instead of proving yung ating conclusion, ipoprove natin yung opposite niya, which is n squared is even. Kabaliktaran nitong n squared is odd is n squared is even. Okay? We will go through the same steps. Kapag ito po, napatunayan na natin na n squared is even, if this is true, ibig sabihin yung original statement natin ay false. Pero kapag itong opposite, tong n squared is even, ay false, ibig sabihin, yung ating original statement ay true. Okay? So, syempre, kung dumaan tayo sa same steps, diba, alam na natin na dahil 2m plus 1 to, hindi siya even. Kasi para maging even, dapat 2m lang. Okay? So, in order for n squared to be even, dapat 2m lang. Pero dahil 2m plus 1 siya, n squared is not even by definition of an even number. So, using indirect proof, na itong na-prove natin that this is false, yung opposite statement ay false. Therefore, the original statement is true. Tama, medyo nakakalito ng konti, no? Medyo. Pero if you're going to analyze, madali lang siya. Okay, di ba? Ang pinoprove lang natin ay yung opposite ng conclusion. Okay? Yung opposite ng conclusion. Pag napatunayan natin na totoo yung opposite ng conclusion, false yung ating original statement. Kapag napatunayan naman natin na false yung opposite ng conclusion, edi true naman yung ating original statement. Okay? So, we will end this by another example para maging clear pa. Okay? This is the same as your given sa learning task nyo mismo. Okay? So, ito na mismo yung gagawin nating example para meron kayong guide. Okay? So, doon, ang given ay, we have an odd integer m and an even integer n. We have to prove that m times n is an even integer. Okay? We could do this by creating a table. Okay? So, we will write down our statements on the left side and then we will provide our reasons on the right side. Okay? So, ano ulit ang sabi? We always start with the given. Sabi, we have m is odd and n is even. Ang reason? Given. Yun na yung binigay sa atin, kaya yun na yun. That's enough reason. So, number 2, we represent. If m is odd, then m is equal to 2k plus 1. Ang reason nito, this is the definition of an odd number. Okay? By definition na siya. So, kung na-define natin si m, si n din, n is equal to 2k. This is by definition of an even number. Okay? So, para nagre-representation lamang tayo. And then, the next is we need to prove yung product daw nila, product ng mn, so m times n, is kung even integer ba siya. So, di multiply natin si mn. Kung ang multiplication ng mn is yun, i-multiply din natin yung quantity 2k plus 1 times 2k. Okay, ang reason natin, let us multiply an odd and an even number. Okay. Of course, we need to perform the operation. So, ito po. Diba? In order to perform the operation, ang gagamitin natin, distributive property. So, yung 2k, times natin kay 2k, we will have 4k squared. Si 2k, let's multiply it with 1. So, we will have 2k. Okay? By distributive property, na-solve natin siya na 4k squared plus 2k. Okay. Again, kailangan natin siyang ilagay sa format ng even number. So, let's factor out 2. Okay, yan. Factor out natin yung 2, ang may iwan sa loob ng parenthesis is 2k squared plus k. Okay. And then, we could represent tong buong nasa loob ng parenthesis by a single variable. So, let's try s naman. Let's use the variable s. So, ang ating reason, substitute the variable s for 2k squared plus k. Ayan na. O, diba? Look at this. mn daw is equal to 2s. So, mn is an even integer. This ang reason by definition of an even number. O, diba? Once na nakasanayan nyo yung process of proving, madali lang siya. Ang challenge sa atin is how much concepts ang alam natin to help us support our statements, no? So, kasi we could have our statements, but we need to provide reasoning for them. So, dito pumapasok yung mga concepts, lahat ng mga natutunan natin, simula pa nung elementary hanggang up to this point. Yan. So, talagang application tong ating proving statements. Okay? Again, everyone, I thank you for joining us for another video lesson. If you have any question at all, feel free to contact us, chat us, PM us your questions, and your grade 8 math teachers will be more than willing to answer your inquiries. Okay, if you want to review our previous videos, just visit our YouTube channel named The Cartesians. Again, enjoy your break for the second quarter and see you for more videos on our third quarter. Bye-bye. Stay safe, everyone.